Welcome to the Naked Coach Collective. We're not just your average coaches, we're your powerhouse of inspiration and your no-nonsense guide to unlocking your hidden potential. We are an eclectic mix of four, each with a unique journey, though we share a passion for transformation through coaching. Tune in every week for topical discussions and witty banter on all things coaching. There might be a few laughs along the way too, but don't be fooled. We're serious about helping you navigate life's twists and turns with clarity and confidence. Are you ready? Sit back, relax, and immerse yourself in the Naked Coach Collective podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Naked Coach Collective. You're here with me, Ian. On today's episode, we've got a very special guest, Corrie Lo, and Corrie helps women in the workforce become confident leaders and entrepreneurs by identifying and addressing their overwhelmed culprit. Now, Corrie is also an inspirational keynote speaker, coach and facilitator, and has been featured in many major media outlets such as TEDx, Girl Boss, Business Insider, Thrive Global, and The Mighty, just to name a few. So just a few things then, Corrie.
Just a few.
So for listeners who may not know you, why don't you give a brief intro?
Sure. So my name is Corrie LoGuidice. I go by Corrie Lo because let's get real, it's a lot easier to find me online searching for Corrie Lo than LoGuidice. You can't really spell it. And that said, I'm working now as a professional keynote and coach, but didn't start that way. Actually, it all started off for me with a super expensive piece of paper that said I could draw well. So I have a fine arts degree. And when it became time to get a job, quote unquote, after college, I couldn't really get a job. So I ended up waiting tables, and that really upset my father at the time. My father was the second generation running my family's large regional electronics distribution company here in the US. So he said, why don't you come work for the family business, see how you like it, and take it from there. So I figured, why not? I'll try it out. Figure it's going to be kind of a part-time gig. Blink, and 15 years later, I'm running it as senior vice president. Never anticipated that to happen, right? But I absolutely love what I did. I like the work that I was doing. Entrepreneurship came very naturally to me, which makes sense as a now fourth generation entrepreneur, with all the folks in my family who have started businesses. And I really loved what I did until I kind of hit this rough patch where I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate to this, where I had a lot of fairly traumatic, pivotal life events happen in a short frame of time, all while I was working and as a leader, an SVP. So in a 5-year time span, I had gone through a miscarriage. I realized I was in an abusive marriage. I ended up leaving said marriage when my son was only 5 months old. Literally had to take my son with me to work one day and didn't go back. And then from there, rebuilt my life from scratch. And again, I was leading, as a senior SVP. No one had any idea any of this was going on behind the scenes. And it wasn't, I didn't make a change either. I was commuting 20 hours a week. The most I ever got to see my son was an hour in the evening, or if I was watching through my home security camera systems while he played with my au pair. And I refused to make a change, because I figured everybody does this. Like, why should it matter? And it wasn't until I had lost my post-divorce partner to suicide, I was the one to find him, that then, I said, you know what, enough's enough. Now it's time for me to make a change. Life is so short, as evident by this morning. I thought I was going to a concert and sharing my life with this person, and now he's not here. So where do I go from here? The ironic part with this whole story and how it's relevant to how I became a coach is right before that last pivotal life event, I had been seeing a therapist, and we had been talking about how I wasn't really, I guess you could say, fulfilled by my career. I liked my career, but I wasn't fulfilled by it. And it was manifesting in different ways, i.e. like depression and stuff like that. And I was in complete denial. And it was my therapist that at one point had said, Corrie, have you ever considered a career switch? When I asked her what she was thinking of, she's like, maybe being a business coach or a life coach. The amount of time I've known you, you've been able to take action over and above what other people do in your situation. and create a better life than you had before the situation. If you could teach other people how to do that, you could have a really huge impact on people. So I dismissed it because a lot of times it's the people outside of us that could see within us what we can't see inside ourselves. So I couldn't see it at that time. But after the suicide loss, I was like, you know what? I'm going to double down. I'm going to figure this out. I launched my coaching business at that time. And within the first couple of weeks, because of my business expertise, I had landed paying clients already. Within the first couple of months, I had multiple different press features. I had a very large audience on social, about 30,000, starting from zero. And within a year, I was a TEDx speaker. So now through my overwhelm culprit framework, I teach other people how to have the same type of massive results through taking action, regardless of whatever their overwhelming circumstances are. And that's my origin story.
Wow. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm kind of a little lost for words there then.
Yeah. And this is why I get paid to speak as well.
So I did have some questions lined up, but
Sure.
I just kind of want to dive into your story there, if that's okay. So,
sure.
As you're going through that getting out with your son from that abusive relationship, how were you coping with everything? Running the business as well. How were you? How were you coping with things?
Honestly, the way I was coping was through workaholism. The more and more I worked, it was kind of like I had an excuse to keep working because it was necessary. I didn't have a choice. And I had to do it in order to keep a roof over our head. I was the sole breadwinner at that time, which made it even more challenging having to leave the home that we shared, even though I was paying for everything. Having to start over from zero, it was really, really difficult. And really, the only way through that is taking it day by day. And really, it was small, tiny, incremental improvements, but a lot of times at the sacrifice of my own well-being, right? My physical health suffered, my mental health suffered. That actually, in the long run, ended up becoming one of the overwhelm culprits that I speak on: lack of conditioning, which is your mental and physical health and wellness. If you're lacking that, it's going to cause you to feel overwhelmed in other areas of your life. So that's a great point. But for me, really, how did I handle it? I really didn't at that time because I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
It wasn't
you
until
just
later.
Kind of cracked on.
Well, there's nothing else I can do because it's either that or my kid and I don't have a place to sleep and food.
Yeah. What's this? Are you okay just to dive in a little bit more on what this overwhelm culprit is?
Yeah, sure.
And what you do there?
Yeah, sure. So during the phase, before, I guess you could say, the suicide loss, I had gone through all these different things, whether it be the miscarriage, the divorce, all sorts of things. I noticed after, when my therapist had really challenged me and she was like, if you could figure out how you did this, right, you could really impact lives. So when I figured out the framework, I noticed it was 5 things. Every single time that I felt overwhelmed, if I was able to bring it back into alignment, I would keep taking action, become motivated, kick things into gear. But here's the thing with overwhelm, though. Overwhelm, quite simply, just means that the actions you're taking today aren't having the same results as they did yesterday, right? So you're kind of like spinning your wheels, and that's why we kind of feel overwhelmed, because it's like stuff being piled on, but it's because you're doing the same stuff and it's not having the same results. So it's not necessarily a negative sign. It's a sign that, hey, something's in misalignment. Figure out what it is, bring it into alignment, you can move it again. So I've noticed that there's 5. It's they're really easy to remember. They all begin with a C. So first one is lack of clarity, right? So it's not just a matter of knowing what you want, it's why you want it, why it's important. So many people get tripped up and overwhelmed because they're not taking action in alignment with their vision, right? Or clarity, because there is no vision, right? So that's the first one. Second one is a lack of confidence. So it's not just a matter of knowing what it is you want. You have to actually believe that you could do it. So when my therapist is a great example, when my therapist had said like, hey, you should become a coach. And I'm in my head thinking like Tony Robbins, who I was majorly inspired by at that time. I was like, are you nuts? No, there's no way I could do that. I didn't believe it. That was a confidence culprit that was holding me back, from that. It wasn't until I tested that confidence, went out there, figured out what I would need in terms of certification, bridged the knowledge gap, to actually understand what coaching is and realize I actually was coaching in the 15 years of senior executive leadership. Like I was doing all of that. I just didn't know it. Once I bridged that confidence gap, then I was able to keep moving, right? So confidence. Third one is your community. So you're the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with, as the famous motivational speaker Jim Rohn once said. So if the people that you're surrounding yourself with aren't supportive, don't believe that you can accomplish what it is you want to do, won't help you get there, then it's going to keep you overwhelmed and held back. Fourth one we already talked about was conditioning. And then the fifth one, and probably the most important one, especially when it comes, if you are a coach and you're running a business, is consistency. So a lot of times people will do like the thing 3 times and be like, oh, it's not working. I give up. I'm overwhelmed. This sucks. Where it's really taking small, consistent actions over time, which allow you to build up those big, crazy results. And the culprits work in a consistent cycle. So it's anytime you get overwhelmed, you figure out which one it is, bring it into alignment. You're going to start moving again. You're not going to feel overwhelmed. Eventually, you are going to come to a point where something's going to change and you become overwhelmed again. And it's going to probably be a different culprit that time. So at certain times, like even just in the course of this conversation, at one point I had felt my confidence culprit was one before I became a coach. But then later on, when things finally settled for me and my business was on the up and up and I had more time with my kids, then the conditioning one popped up for me, because all those years I was kind of just pushing through and not paying attention to my sleep and not paying attention to my mental health. It caught up with me, right? So that became my culprit, and that is what I focused my attention on. So it's a very easy to use framework, and you just move on and move on. That answer your question?
Well, yeah. Yeah. What kind of what other examples do some of your clients have that you can maybe share?
Well, it really depends, because I deliver the overwhelm culprits in 2 different ways. The first one is to large audiences. So my clients in that space, it's mostly like corporate employee resource groups. I do a lot of leadership conferences, and that's just telling, through storytelling, helping people relate the culprits to their own life. And then the other way I do it is through my coaching. And it's interesting too, because with the coaching, the framework can be applied, whether it be for personal or professional or even business development. So when you think about it and you're working with a team, right, of people, and the team is overwhelmed with a project or a big change or something like that coming up, it's the same 5 things that you're looking at. Is the team, do they have clarity and direction from leadership, right? Do they have the confidence that they could get the job done? If not, what skills do you need to help them to bridge the gap? Do they have the right people on the team, right? That's their community side of it. Are they being overworked? Are they burnt out, right? That's where it ties into conditioning. And then consistency. Are they taking action on the right things on a regular basis? Is anybody holding them accountable for it? Are they being held accountable to themselves? Right. So those are just some examples, but the framework can be applied in multiple different ways, whether it be teams, businesses, individuals, personal development, professional development. It's really flexible to be able to use it that way.
Nice. Excellent. You kind of throw me with such a good intro from yourself in terms of the questions I was going to ask. So I want to kind of just dive right into your kind of coaching journey, really, and what that's been like for you, kind of like what ups and what highs and lows you've had during your kind of coaching journey. Take us through that, if you would.
Sure. So when I first started, probably the most difficult part for me when I first started, I found it easy to, number one, build an audience. Obviously, the social media audience thing, I had worked in digital media and marketing and stuff like that for over 15 years. So when it came to actually applying that to my own brand, that was fairly effortless. Also, in terms of landing clients, like I knew how to do high ticket sales calls. I knew how to do a lot of this stuff from my prior career. So that wasn't the challenge. For me, it was my own money mindset coming into it. What do I charge? What is my value worth? Undercharging for quite a while and being like, why can't I pay the bills? It's like literally me, my son, and a mortgage at this point. I'm like, how do I make this work? So it took me some, time, money, and effort. I'm a huge proponent of working with mentors. At this point, I've worked with mentors every step of my journey. I, right off the bat, had worked with a coach when I first started my business, who coincidentally, I just signed to work with her again. She was doing all the different things I was kind of noodling on wanting to do in my career, even though I wasn't quite sure. She was working as a coach, she was working as a speaker, she was working as an author. So those were three kind of avenues I knew I was interested in. So she kind of helped me with the initial, like, kicking up the coaching business. Then I worked for a while, hefty investment with a high performance coach for coaches that really got things up and running. I've worked with folks for developing online courses. I've worked with folks. I have one mentor in particular for my speaking business specifically. If there's any kind of a skill set that you're looking for the industry expertise, there's no faster way to get that knowledge than by working with somebody and investing in it. So that was pivotal for me. I was not afraid to spend money when I first started because I literally had everything riding on it. It was either I survived or I had to go and find another job that was just like the one I was leaving, that I was still going to have to put my kid in daycare with extended hours to be able to work a 9 to 5. And I just wasn't willing to do that. And it ultimately paid off. But I would say that was the hardest part, was the money mindset side of it. Like knowing, what I should be charging for my value, which, spoiler, it was actually a lot more than I thought, considering I was working as a senior vice president for so many years. When you think about it, it's like I was making well over, 6 figures in that position, but I was charging people at the time. I think my lowest package was like $1,000 for like 6 months of coaching. It was ridiculous. Okay. Like I should not, no, don't do that. So it took me some time to kind of figure that out, but now I got it figured out and things are going good.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah. But that's a big part of it too, is your self-awareness. You need to understand like what you're not great at, right? And really be like humble, and that was a big thing for me too. This is a second part to the first question you had asked me. Because part of me coming into running a coaching business, because I was running such a large operation before for so many years, I was like, oh, this is business. I've got this. Right. So there's a certain kind of like confidence, but I had that in the electronics and tech industry. I did not have that in the training, and professional development arena. I did not know that industry at all. So it took me a little bit to get kind of humbled by it and understanding like, oh, this industry works differently. This industry, you have to communicate differently. This industry, you have to handle things differently. And then from there, that's when it clicked for me. And I was like, okay, if I want to get into anything new, I need to get a mentor that's been in that world and can teach me the ropes, which is what I did with speaking. And very recently, I actually just earlier this week signed with an author mentor, because that's going to be my next big thing. Is I'm working on a book proposal on the overwhelmed culprits. Mm-hmm.
So you're a little busy then.
A little busy. Yeah. And that's I've got 4 kids. I'm remarried. It's chaos all the time, but it's good chaos.
Good chaos. Yeah,
good
exactly.
Chaos. Yeah.
What's one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were first starting out? It sounds like you're kind of pretty much on the ball from everything that you've been saying, really. So what's one thing you know now that you didn't know at the time that you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
The one thing that I wish that I knew was not to invest, and this is just for me personally, not to invest in working with, whether it be contractors, vendors, things like that, to do initiatives that would be something like quote unquote new that you don't have experience with, as opposed to doing the work, figuring out the systems and processes yourself, and then hiring contractors and training them to do what you've already validated. That would be the big one for me, because a lot of folks, I think they're very quick to do things. Like one of the things I did very early on, and mind you, I was managing a very large company before this. So when I decided I was going to go all in on something like YouTube, I'm like, oh, no problem. I'm going to hire a 7-person team, and we're going to churn out all of my YouTube content. I'm going to record it. I'm going to have the video editor. I'm going to have a copywriter who's going to, strip stuff out and repurpose and do this and do that. And I hired people who I thought could do certain aspects better than I could do myself. But truth was, a lot of the stuff that I did myself was outperforming the things that these professionals were bringing to the table. Whereas since then, I've seen much better success by saying, this is my process. This is what has worked for me. I know this very well. I'm going to bring in somebody that's maybe a little more junior and teach them to do it my way. And that's actually going to amplify my results better than bringing on somebody who's an expert in their field, but not necessarily an expert in my line of work, my brand, my voice, my mission.
Okay. And is it anything else other than YouTube that you kind of apply that approach to with your processes?
Yeah, it could be pretty much anything. Because I think a lot of times too, for brand new business owners, they come into this and everybody automatically thinks like, oh my God, I need to have a website. I need to have this crazy content plan. I need to be on all the different platforms at once. And truth is, no, you don't. Like, you don't need any of that. I built the vast majority of my coaching business working with brand new entrepreneurs. So folks who have wanted to be coaches, service providers, marketing professionals, that sort of thing. And we do it without websites, without content, without paid ads. It's how you communicate what you're offering. It's who your niche is. It's being able to have a conversation with somebody over Zoom, over the phone, in person, and communicating your value to the point that they say, where do I sign up? Because if you can't do that, all the other stuff, you're just burning your money. Because when it comes to especially things like social media and digital, you're competing with every other professional out there that has those things nailed down already. And it's just going into a void. The algorithm just sweeps it away and no one ever sees it because you're not going back to the overwhelm covers. You don't have the clarity one set yet, right? You're not clear on who you're serving. You're not clear on why they should find you valuable. You're not clear on exactly what their problem is yet. Once you lock that in, then it becomes much easier.
Nice. What is so for a new, say, example, I want to be a new coach. I'm in my current 9 to 5, want to strike out on my own and set up my own business, but I'm finding myself getting really overwhelmed with everything that's out there in terms of what I can do, what I should be doing. What kind of advice would you give that person?
Sure. So the very first step is identifying what it is you should be offering, right? Because a lot of times we think we want to get into a certain industry because it looks really profitable seeing other people do it. Like, oh, I'm looking at this coach on Instagram who's talking about, 20K months and this and that. And they work, selling, business coaching to Etsy, business owners. That's what I should do, even though you have no experience with Etsy, right? It's like making sure that whatever you're coaching on is in alignment with things that you've personally mastered or experienced. Right? Because I find a lot of times too, I work with brand new coaches that they want to solve a problem for people that they're in the process of solving themselves. Right. So when I first started as a coach, it would not have been ethical or in alignment for me to start a coaching program for either widows or people who were divorced, because I was still dealing with the grief and the emotions and things like that to heal from that myself. Who am I to guide somebody through that? But when I first started my business, I was very well positioned to work with brand new business owners because I was doing that for 15 years in my prior job. So making sure that you're finding something that, number one, you have direct experience, because also the confidence part of it comes out with that. Making sure that it's a problem that people actually want to have solved. So doing research, right? Going online, looking at what people are complaining about, what their challenges are, so on and so forth, and making sure you're creating your offers in a way that is in alignment for what the client thinks that they need and what they can afford, right? When you have all those things kind of aligned, then you will make money. Like, you will find people. But if you don't have that level of clarity just starting out, basically what I find a lot of new coaches do is they'll tweak their website for hours, or they'll like change the hex color on their logo, or they'll set up a social media page and they're like, I'm working on my business. But you're not working on your business. You don't have a business until you know like who your client is, what their problem is, and how you're solving it for them.
Nice. Thank you. So many people are going to find that valuable.
I hope so.
I wish I knew that when I was first starting out as well. That's the one thing I wish I knew when I was first starting out.
I had a mentor. Actually, I've had a few different mentors who have described that, that thing, because it's so common where you're like creatively working on stuff that isn't really work. You're avoiding the difficult conversations of trying to sell an offer to somebody, which people avoid like the plague because they don't want to like talk to people about money. But I had one mentor who described it as creative avoidance, which is true. And I have another one who calls it procrastinating, which I think is like the best. Like, it's so true. That's Denise Duffield Thomas for anybody interested. Yeah.
So. There's something that I kind of talk through with my clients a lot, and you touched on it a little earlier. And the way I phrase it is, show me your 5 closest friends and I will show you the rest of your life. And it touches on that kind of support of community around you. Are you okay just kind of touch on that and how that helped you on your journey?
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, no, I mean the people you surround yourself with are a direct reflection of where you are in your life. So initially, before I started this journey, truth was I didn't surround myself with a lot of people at all because I was with a partner at the time that prevented me from being around other people. He isolated me from my family. He isolated me from my friends. Basically, the only people I saw on a regular basis were him every day and the people I worked with who were my family. But still at that time, like what I needed to be able to really thrive as an individual was to be out of that toxicity, right? So it wasn't until I changed that, but your circle is going to change during the different phases of your life. So great examples I could think of using my own personal life to demonstrate. When I first got divorced, what are the ways that I found, that circle of people who understood? Because people at my job didn't really get what I was going through. They didn't even know because I didn't share it. My family didn't really get it. No one's ever been divorced. I ended up moving to a brand new town, with my son, and I knew no one. So I went out there and proactively looked for people to add into my circle. And this is actually a really funny story. So I did what most people do nowadays, where they join the local Facebook group and, look to see like all the, moms are complaining about, what's going on, down at the street here. There's so many cops and sirens and it's so loud, like that kind of gossip stuff.
I'm literally in one of those groups.
Right. Yeah. Everybody is. So I had done that and was in there for a while. I was just lurking. And then at some point, another mom posted something and she was like, "Are there any other single moms here?" And I was like, "Oh, that's me." I'm like, "Oh, but maybe I shouldn't comment because I wouldn't know them." And I'm like, "Well, that's the stupidest thing ever because they are the only people that would actually empathize with what you went through." So I commented, I was like, "Hey, I am. And wouldn't it be cool if we had our own group?" Not even 2 minutes later, I get a ping from Facebook that, "Congratulations, you are now the admin of the local community single moms group." And I'm like, "Huh?" So the OP had actually set up a group. She had added me as an admin and she was like, "Cool, we've got a group now." And I took it really seriously, at the time, because I'm like, I know nobody and this ain't happening unless somebody, take leadership, and run with it. So I started off by doing things like, I'm going to the beach with my son. If anybody wants to meet up, we'll be, at this place at this time. And people started to show up. And it got to the point that we were drawing in a large enough crowd that we would do wine tasting events where we would rent buses. We would end up taking out entire rooms at restaurants, the private rooms to set up events. We would do collaborative babysitting, with our kids, where everybody would like take the kids one night so that they could go on dates. So it was, I very much built a community, but that community didn't come to me, right? I went out to find them. But even with that said, as close as that community was, when I met my new partner, who has since passed, they didn't have anything in common with me anymore. And they started to kind of fall by the wayside. So by the time I found myself grieving as a pseudo widow after that, I was at the exact same place that I started before, that I had no one in my circle that really understood that. So that took me having to go to, I found a suicide loss survivors group, started going to that. So I could actually speak to people who were going through exactly what it was I was going through, and basically making sure that you're curating your circle for where you are in your life and what your goals are. Most recently for me, I realized, hey, I want to be an author. I need to surround myself with people who are actively writing books. My mentor is one of those people, which is why I signed up to work with her directly. So you got to put yourself in the room. Otherwise it doesn't happen.
There's also something I've heard from, and I'll paraphrase a little, and it's from Rich Litvin, the coach, where he says, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room.
Yes.
Which I really, really liked as well. So that again emphasizes the point of going out and finding the right people to be around.
Exactly.
Corrie, you've provided so much value and such an inspirational story to begin with that completely blew me away. So thank you for that. What is, just to wrap it up, what is one piece of advice you would give someone who is looking for a coach, So they're in the process. They're going through something that they need help with. Therapy may not have worked previously, and they've heard of this thing called coaching. What advice would you give to that person?
Two different things that I think are super, super important. The first one is to look for a coach who has direct experience with whatever it is that you're challenged with, right? So whether that be the divorce, whether that be starting the business, whether that be, the specific thing, you want somebody who has done it or has helped other people get those results, right? Because when you think about it, Olympic coaches, for example, a lot of them aren't Olympic athletes, but they've gotten people to the Olympics, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean they've had to have done it directly, but they have to have some kind of tangible, direct experience in coaching people through those results. The second, which I think is the more important part of it, is similar to therapy. You need to find a coach that you really vibe with, right? You need to be 1,000% comfortable, confident, open, honest with them on the call. But on the flip side, the coach needs to feel the same way about you. Because if the coach doesn't feel that it's a safe space for them to call you on your BS, like you ain't going to get anywhere. And the coaching, you're not going to get what it is that you're looking for. So it's really, really important to find somebody that you feel really comfortable with and they feel the same way with you. And it's like interviewing therapists. You should interview multiple coaches as opposed to just going with the very first one because they meet your budget.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you so much. That's a great place to wrap it up, I think.
You're very welcome.
Cheers, Corrie.
Thanks, Ian.